Hello, my name is Alexandria Crank, and I will be presenting on my thesis, in which I analyze the barriers to on-campus counseling for Meredith College students experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression. Overall, college health centers often go underutilized. Less than a third of students use their campus health center, and less than half of those appointments are for preventative care. When students neglect their preventative care, they often neglect their health further down the line. And use of healthcare on campus is positively correlated with health later in life. So when students neglect to care for themselves in college, they are more likely to neglect to care for themselves later on in life. Mental health is also an issue with college students. Between a third to half of college students are diagnosed with psychiatric illnesses each year. And while many colleges have mental health services, they often go underutilized because of attitudinal barriers that students may have. Past research has largely focused on attitudinal barriers for white, straight individuals. And I specifically wanted to look at my community at Meredith College to better understand how we can improve mental health treatment and overall health for our student population. The Meredith College Counseling Center offers free services to all students, regardless of their residential status. And these services include one-on-one counseling, group services, and crisis hours. My research questions were: what are the strongest predictors of use for the Meredith College Counseling Center, and what prevents students from utilizing counseling services? I hypothesized that students will be less likely to use the counseling center if they have higher depression, anxiety, and stigma scores, and lower fit and value scores. Fit scores measure how one thinks they will be able to find a good fit at the counseling center. Value scores measure how someone perceives mental health and how they care about their own mental health and value improving mental health. My participants were all Meredith students, and I used convenience sampling. My survey included questions from the PHQ-8, a depression inventory, the GAD-7, an anxiety inventory, the revised FSV scale, which measured fit, stigma, and value, and Williams's demographic questionnaire to better get to know my participants. I also created my own counseling center questions that were geared towards the Meredith College Counseling Center and individuals' use of the counseling center. The survey was distributed and taken online, and it consisted of a consent form, survey, and then debriefing. For analysis, I ran correlations, logistic regressions, and chi-squares analyses through SPSS. When it came to results, I had 58 participants. All were full-time students, most were white, identified as female, and financially secure. About half of my participants were heterosexual, and the majority of them fell in the mild range for depression and anxiety and scored in the low range for stigma, fit, and value. This means that they did not have a lot of stigma surrounding mental health care. They didn't really think that they would find a good fit at the counseling center, and they did not really value mental health very much. Only one individual scored in the severe range for depression, and 8 scored in the severe range for anxiety. I first ran a chi-square analysis to find if certain minority statuses were related to counseling center use. I found that gender identity, sexual minority status, and racial minority status were all not significantly related to use of the counseling center. With my correlational variables, I found that those who felt down, depressed, irritable, or hopeless were more likely to have used the counseling center, along with these other variables. So feeling bad about yourself or that you were a failure, feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge, not being able to stop or control worrying, worrying too much about different things, in total anxiety scores, as those increased, people were more likely to use the counseling center. I also found that for those who did not trust a counselor to keep matters between the client and the counselor, and those who thought that counseling would be unnecessary because problems would resolve on their own, they were both negatively correlated with use of the counseling center, which means that people who thought these things or felt this way were less likely to use available services. Finally, I ran a logistic regression with each of these significant variables, so each of these that you see up here, to examine whether or not they were strong predictors of use. And none of these variables were predictors of use of the counseling center. I did not find significance. So the implications. Those certain symptoms of anxiety and depression and having a high anxiety score were significant predictors, were significantly related to use of the counseling center. I cannot say that they were significant predictors because I did not have significance with my logistic regression, but the variables are related. And I'm hoping that with more power as I continue recruitment, I will be able to find significance with a regression. Similarly, with barriers to use, I found that those who did not trust a counselor and those who thought their problems would resolve on their own were less likely to use the counseling center, and those were barriers to use of the counseling center. And overall, depression and anxiety were positively correlated with use of the counseling center. So we're doing something right with our students who are experiencing depression and anxiety. They are seeking help. The only problem is our correlations are quite weak. So we do need to improve accessibility and reduce barriers for individuals who are feeling depressed or anxious. On the other end of the spectrum, people who have low fit and value scores, so they don't think that they will find a fit with the counseling center and don't think that mental health is particularly important, are not reaching out for help. And those are the people who need help the most. So something needs to be done to help improve perception of the counseling center and of mental health. Stigma did not have any relationships with these variables, at least not significant ones. And I'm hoping that as I continue recruitment, I can find more evidence related to stigma. The limitations of my survey or my study were the sample size. I only had 58 participants and not everybody filled out every question. The type of sampling, I used convenience sampling, so a lot of people knew me already or knew people who knew me, and thus probably had some idea of what I was measuring and perception of psychology, because I am a psychology major and I know a lot of people in the psychology department, and we all were connected in that way. Additionally, my population or my sample size, my sample was not as diverse as my population. About 75% of my participants were white, but about 67% of Meredith College is white. Going forward, I'm hoping to increase diversity. And I also would like to increase accessibility because I used a QR code and a link. Not every person has access to a camera all the time to scan the QR code. And sometimes you don't have access to a screen that is compatible with Google Forms. So if you have not already taken my survey, please fill it out. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me or my research advisor, Dr. Pravat, with any additional questions. Thank you.